I meant to say Happy Father's Day. So Happy Father's Day. Those are such endearing words. Dad, Mom, Grandpa, Grandma, and all the other derivatives of that, the Omas and Oompas and whatever else you call yourselves, but the grandkids know your names, and it's so endearing. And the Bible uses a lot of endearing terms. We talk about fathers. We talk about sons and daughters. We talk about brothers and sisters. We talk about heirs, family terms that show the closeness to God and his family through these family terms. And then there's other terms like sheep and disciple and follower and servants. And those are terms that denote the need for guidance that we have. And they come close together. But there's another term we're going to be looking at this morning, and that is the term friend. Friend. We are friends. Jesus calls us friends. Now, friends denote an equality. We're friends. We're equal with one another. There's a quality, but there's a devotion to one another. There's a familiarity that we have, and there's a loyalty that we have. A friend is somebody who knows everything about us but still likes us anyway. Friends are wonderful. I've had so many wonderful friends throughout my lifetime. I remember my childhood friends that we ran around together. And, man, they were characters, I don't know what really drew us together, but we were friends. And, the old saying, a man who has friends is never poor. What's that? It's a wonderful life, I think. And we sing about friendship. What a friend we have in Jesus. I have found a friend in Jesus. He's everything to me. And there's not a friend like the lowly Jesus. No, not one. No, not one. He's my best friend. Jesus is my best friend. We talk about friendship and Jesus as our friend. And that's what we're going to look at in our text. Our text today is John, the 15th chapter. And we're going to begin reading here in the 12th verse. He says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends, if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you would go and bear fruit, and that your fruit would remain, so that whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he may give to you. This I command you, that you love one another." Jesus calls us friends. And there's a strong connection here in this section between being a friend of Jesus and love. Love and friendship go together is what he's talking about. And I like the concept of being a friend with Jesus, but the real emphasis here is on love. We can't forget that. I mean, it's the way he starts the section and the way he ends it. He starts off verses 12 and 13. "This is my commandment, that you love one another just as I loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends." And then verse 17. "This I command you, that you love one another." Love. You might be thinking, haven't we just heard that sermon on love before? I mean, how many times are you going to preach a sermon on love? I mean, didn't we just have this love sermon? Well, the answer is yes, we did. Then why am I doing it again? Because it's in the text. This is one of the interesting things of following through in a text, is that sometimes John circles around and talks about the same thing because that's what Jesus did. And so if he's going to circle around and talk about love again, well, then I'm going to do it too. And so he's got this repetition. Back in chapter 13, he talked about love. Chapter 13, verse 34 and 35. "I'm giving you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another." We just talked about that a few weeks ago. And then in chapter 14, verse 15, he says, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." We heard this over and over. And then chapter 14, verse 21, "The one who has my commandments and keeps them is the one who loves me. And the one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and will reveal myself to him. And then chapter 14, verses 23 and following, Jesus answered and said to them, if anyone loves me, he will follow my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our dwelling with him. The one who does not love me does not follow my words, and the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me. And then again in chapter 15, verse 9 and 10, just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. Whew. Yeah, he's been talking about love over and over. What's the repetition for? Because it's really important that we understand this basic idea. We've got to love each other. I once was going to a church, and like we used to do here on Wednesday nights, they always had the invitation, at the end of Bible classes. And there was one guy at the church that, he was the default guy, when we didn't have anybody else to speak, he was the guy. He was our yes man. He was going to, and so he spoke quite a bit. And I remember the first time he got up to speak, he spoke about love. It was a wonderful little talk about our need for loving one another. A couple of weeks later, he got up, give another talk, and it was on love, how we need to love one another. And over the years, as I went on Wednesday nights, and I don't know how often I heard, there was only one lesson he ever gave. It was on love. Love. And he said, why do you continually talk about love? He says, because that's the needed lesson. That's the one we still haven't got yet. That's the one we're still working on. It's the important one, but it's also the hard one. It's the hardest one for us, isn't it? To love one another. What about all these people with their quirks and their hurts and their porcupine personalities? It could be really hard to love one another. Oh, by the way, did I tell you we need to love one another? Are you listening? We need to love one another. That's what he's doing. It's like driving a nail in. Usually it takes more than one blow by the hammer to get it set all the way home. And that's what he's doing. He's hitting it. He's just trying to drive it home. And he keeps hammering this. Maybe he'll get it home to us. It's we love one another. And in the context here, the other synoptics tell us something that John doesn't tell us, and that is, during this upper room conversation, they had been arguing with one another. They've been talking about who's the greatest. I mean, you got to wonder, but these are big personalities. There's jealousies there. They're envying one another. They're not getting along. And you know some of these guys because you have somebody like Matthew the tax collector and Simon the zealot. Politically, they're so far extreme from one another. We got the Republicans and the Democrats here, the liberals and the conservatives, all right here in the upper room. And he says, look, you got to love one another. You got to knock this fighting off. You got to knock this stuff off. And why are they arguing? Because they're just like us. They're extremely selfish. They're extremely self-centered. You listen to WIIFM. It's what's in it for me. We all want to know what's in it for us. And it's not easy to love people. A lady once came to me and she handed me a cartoon. And on the cartoon, it had a knight in armor. And the caption was, I challenge you to a friendship. I knew what she was talking about. Let's try it. Let's see if we can work this out. Let's try to be friends. And she'd been hurt over the years. She'd been burnt over the years because friendship has risk with it. And so if there's not a love there behind it all, we're going to have a real hard time being friends. Now, Jesus, when he's talking about love, doesn't put a period on it. He puts a comma on it. Want you to love one another as I have loved you. And so he raises the standard because the question we always have as people, well, just how much do I have to love them? When Jesus talking about forgiveness, just how many times do I have to forgive my brother? 7 times? No, an indefinite number of times. You have to, without restriction, forgive each other. Well, how much do I have to love each other? I mean, this much or to the moon and back? No, as much as Jesus loved you. Well, that pretty well settles it. That's the comparison. He's the standard. When Paul's writing to husbands, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Man, that's a large standard, and that's a huge standard to reach. Jesus says the greatest thing someone could do is die for his friends. When I read that, I think, yet, it's hard to die for your friends. You know what's almost seems as hard is to live for your friends. I might want to die for you. I'm not sure I want to live for you. There's a big difference there, isn't there, sometimes? And while you're still alive, can I do that? And in verse 18, now just sneak off to next week if I can. I just want to mention this. If the world hates you, you know that it's hated me before it hated you. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand. The world doesn't dislike you. It's not irritated by you. It hates you. And if we're going to get by in this life, we have to have someone who loves us. I need someone to love me. And he says, that's what the family of God's all about, is loving each other. And sometimes we want the world to love us. And if you get too much in love with the world, then the church starts hating you. And, we want everything. Want everybody to love us. But he says, look, that's not going to happen. The world's going to hate you. It hated me. But you have to love each other. You got to build each other. You got to be there for each other. And he says, so he starts off with this idea of love. And then he starts talking about friendship. You are my friends if you do what I command you. That's kind of an odd statement. Earlier this week, as I was starting to study this, I came to my wife. I said, "Do you want to be friends?" Well, yeah, of course, yes, I want to be friends. Do you want me to be like Jesus? Well, yes. Okay, then I want you to do everything I tell you to do. And she smiled. You learn after a while that women have different smiles. There's a smile that says, "Oh, I'm really glad to see you. I'm really in love with you." And then there's that smile that says, "God bless you. You're an idiot." And that was the one I was getting, that kind of smile. But what kind of friendship is this? Because we think of friendship as equality. And Jesus says, no, you're my friends, but I want you to do what I say. Then that sounds a little bit odd. I want you to keep my commandments. Of course, the main commandment, what's behind all the commandments, is love. What he's saying is you love. This is the expectation of friendship, is that you love each other, and you love me, and I love you. Jesus not only tell us what to do, he's going to tell us why to do it, which is important. For some reason, when I was going through this section, I thought about an experience I had, about 30-some years ago. We had that little Mazda station wagon. Some of you may remember, if you have that kind of memory, about some 30 years ago. And we went down to visit my mother, who lived down in the L.A. area at the time, and that's where I grew up, in a city called Linwood. And if you look it up online, it says it's a ghetto. And your likelihood of experiencing violence is pretty high there. And I was visiting my mom, and I went down to the end of the street. There was a Winchell's Donuts, and I went in there to get some donuts for us to have. And a sheriff pulled up, and he came in, and I thought, it's not unusual to have a policeman in a donut shop. But when I saw this guy, I thought, wow, he had a weapon on his hip, and he had one in his pants, and he had two on his bulletproof vest. And he looks at me and he says, "Are you from Oregon?" Because he saw my car, and I'm the only one in there. I said, "Yes." He said, "What are you doing here?" "I'm visiting my mom down the street." "Well, look, you don't need to be exploring the neighborhood here, because it's not very safe." I said, "Well, I grew up here. I'm pretty well familiar with it." "You know where Imperial Highway is?" "Yeah, I know where that is. I grew up here." Like I said, "Well, I don't want you to go past Long Beach Boulevard. It's not that far away." He says, "Because I cannot protect you. We cannot protect you if you go past that place." And I thought, wow. Not only did he tell me what to do, and we hate to be told what to do, don't we? But he told me why. He told me the why. And Jesus is that way too. He not only tells us what, but he tells us the why. And he says, because you're no longer slaves, you're going to be my friends. And slavery, the word slave is an emotionally an emotional word. When you start talking about slavery, people get upset. In fact, critics of the Bible are always constantly criticizing. And I wanted to, when I first started writing my notes, I thought, I got to talk about slavery just a little bit, because it's so twisted out of Scripture. When we were going through 1 Peter not that long ago, during the COVID stuff, so it wasn't that long ago. In the second chapter, he starts talking, and I explained about slavery because he was talking about it, the difference between slavery in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I decided I'm not going to do that. If you want to know about that, go back to the lesson in 1 Peter 2 and look it up online or whatever. But I want to make the point here, and the point he wants to make. He says, I have made it known to you. I don't want you to be slaves anymore. You're friends because I have made this known to you. Whatever the Father has said, I have made that known to you. You're no longer in the dark. I've told you what, and I'm telling you why. Because I have made, that's a powerful statement he's made. I have made known to you. You know, a master might like his slave. He might be kind to his slave. He might trust his slave, but the one thing that he'll never do is regard him as an equal. And he's not going to tell him what's going on in his mind, and he's not going to offer him an explanation. You go do this or you go do that, and you do it because I said so, because he's the master, you're the slave. He expects obedience without explanation. And Jesus says, we've come to this point where we are friends. I'm going to tell you why. I'm telling you why. And we know these things. He's talking about this knowledge that we're going to have here. One of the first heresies that entered into Christianity was called Gnosticism. The Gnostics, the word Gnostic, it means to know. They were the knowing ones. And it was so early that many of our New Testament books refers to it. Colossians is addressing that. Paul addresses that. John addresses that in his writings, this idea of knowing it. And so when you read those books, they're talking about we know, over and over, because he wants us to know that these guys are wrong. There's nothing that you don't know yet. There's not a mystery here in Christianity that we haven't told you about. And that's what that's what the Gnostics were saying. Well, we have this special knowledge. And when I was going to school studying Gnosticism, I thought, what a waste. I have never met a Gnostic in my life, and I probably never will. But what I've realized over the years is that Gnosticism has always been around. We just call it something else. I mean, have you ever heard of anybody who's woke? I mean, we're having an awakening right now. These people who are coming, we now realize more than you have ever done. We understand sexuality better than you, and justice better than you, and equality better than you. You guys are just uneducated. You need to do some research. You're ignorant. This was a mystery, but we found all this stuff out. And now, if you're not experienced that, I don't know where you have been, because I've experienced it several times. But Christianity is based on a knowledge, but it's not a hidden knowledge. It's right there. We're letting you know. This is what Christianity is all about. Paul said, I'm talking to you about something that was once a mystery. It was once hidden, but now has been revealed to you. With Christianity, we proclaim it. There's nothing hidden about Christianity. There's no secret handshake that you guys don't know. There's not something that I know that you guys don't know. You know, sometimes people, he's the preacher, he must know something. No, I don't know nothing different than you. I've got the same Bible you got. I have the same words that you have. We all have the same knowledge. Christianity is based on knowledge. That's why he says to go and proclaim it. I think I still get mail. You remember that? I still get mail here at the building, and it's somebody, God revealed this to me, and I want you to know about this. And sometimes it's a preacher or something, some secret knowledge. That's how Mormonism got started, by the way. Joseph Smith had this secret knowledge nobody else knew about, and people bought into that secret idea. But he said, look, you know this. And it's one of the great things about Christianity is he's told us what we need to know to have a relationship with him. And then he goes on in verse 16, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit would remain, and whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he will give to you. Now, when you first read that, I chose you. There's this concept of election in Scripture, and sometimes the sovereignty of God and individual responsibility seem to have a tension between one another. Is this God doing this, or am I responsible for this? And there's sometimes a tension that we talk about. That's not what this is talking about here. This is not talking about election or being chosen that way. What he's saying is, I chose you. He's speaking to the 12. It's interesting, even John Calvin said that. He says this is not talking about the election that he teaches. He's saying this is to the 12. Back in chapter 6 of John, he says, Jesus answered them, did I not myself choose you, the 12? Yet one of you is a devil. Now he meant Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was going to betray him. And now he's reminding them, I chose you. You didn't choose me, I chose you. You're the 12 because I chose you as the 12. Now, he lost Judas. One was lost. And he's going to mention this again in John 17, 12. But that's what he's talking about. I chose you. And in Acts, the 10th chapter, it says, God raised him up on the third day and granted that he be revealed, not to all the people, but to witnesses who had been chosen beforehand by God. That is, to us who ate and drank with him after he arose from the dead. And he ordered us to preach to the people and to testify solemnly that this is the one who has been appointed by God as judge of the living and the dead. He said, there's some chosen ones. The 12 that were with him from the very beginning, the ones that ate with him after he was raised from the dead. He chose us to be witnesses of him. In Acts, the first chapter, you might remember what Judas was going to be replaced by someone they're trying to decide. In verse 24, they picked Matthias. He was chosen. Now, when they chose Matthias as one of the 12, they weren't choosing that he would be saved. That was already dealt with. So when we talk about being chosen, not always talking about chosen to be saved, chosen in a special way. That's what he's talking about here. He's talking to the 12. He chose you and that you would bear fruit. And one of the things is that we are part of that fruit. We are receiving the testimony of the apostles. That's what we've been talking about this morning, is the testimony that John is giving us about Jesus. This is the gospel according to John. And we have the gospel according to Matthew. We have these apostles teaching us and leading us to Christ. And so it would seem that he's talking to all of us, but he's talking to the 12 here in verse 16. And then he says, and then you're going to bear fruit and you're going to ask whatever in my name. And of course, there's the emphasis on that. That includes us too. We've seen that in chapter 14, verse 13, and verse 14, chapter 15, verse 7. And so we come to the end. This I command you that you love one another. So what are we talking about? Well, really just two things, haven't we? It's about friendship and it's about love. Friends. We're friends because the full gospel has been revealed to us. We are equal as friends. Nobody has a special knowledge. No one has something, an insight that nobody else has. We all have the same scriptures. We all are friends together, and we have love. What a challenging year this has been to love. You know, to love each other, to wear a mask when we're around everybody. We're not vaccinated. Boy, that's a hassle, but we do it because we love others. We don't want to make anybody else sick because we might be carrying something because we haven't been vaccinated, so we keep our mask on, and we haven't been all able to gather, and that's because of love. And so the question I think the text really asks us is, are you a friend of Jesus? Are you loving, and are you devoted to those who he loves and who he calls friends to one another? How devoted are we to one another? We'll die for one another, but will we live for one another? That's the question. You know, what a powerful verse. This upper room discourse that started back in chapter 13 and will continue through chapter 17 is just full of wonderful things for us to absorb. And so, just like the good carpenter, I'm going to keep pounding the nail until we drive it all the way in. And so we'll keep looking at these things. May God bless you this week.